The writer who has given me the greatest joy and influenced me more than any other is James Baldwin. I grew up in a church, as did he. His immersion in the Baptist church seeped from his words. I could feel the Baptist minister in him testifying as he told his stories. His religious references, his rhythms reverberating within my church every Sunday soul. His depiction of the divide in the black community between the street, the people who were going to bed on Sunday morning after a long night of partying, and the church, the ones who were headed to the sanctuary while the others were arriving home. In his novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, so reflected my world. When I read it, I could see my brother, my mother, and I passing the neighbors who lived down the street as we were on our way to Great Hope Baptist Church in Robbins, Illinois. James Baldwin taught me to allow my sexuality, my culture, my concerns, my experiences, my rhythms to influence whatever I choose to write. All that I was as a human being, I can lay on the page. During the last month, I have read many of Baldwin's work looking for the answer to this question. How do we as oppressed people and the supporters of oppressed people take our concerns and rage and create literature that touches the reader and audience and makes them think, move their heart, and jump in recognition? Though much of what I read covers fiction, I find those goals are the same in every genre. Around the time I discovered James Baldwin, I read Native Son, the story of Bigger Thomas, a 20-year-old impoverished black man from the south side of Chicago who accidentally commits a murder, then commits a rape which sends him to death row. Later, I learned that it was an enormous bestseller in the 1940s, multiply the sociological impact of Ta-Nehisi Coates several times. In Baldwin's essays and reviews, he is a voice crying in the wilderness, warning do-gooders the road to hell is paved with good intentions. His ire is directed at the protest novels concerned with protesting against discrimination. Baldwin includes Native Son in this category. He attacks them with moral vigor, asking, how closely do these novels reflect the social or sociological questions which, since admittedly, they are not, by and large, good novels, are they the sole reason for being? Is the great work these novels are presumably doing in the world quite worth the torture they are to read? I can feel him snarl as he wrote that. At the end of his essay, Everybody's Protest novel, Baldwin concludes, the failure of the protest novel lies in its rejection of life, the human being, the denial of his beauty, dread, power, and his insistence that it is the categorization as American black alone which is real and which cannot be transcended. Wright, according to Baldwin, was guilty of attempting to redeem a symbolic monster created by the American Republic and full of rage in social terms. Baldwin writes, Bigger has no discernible relationship to himself, to his own life, to his own people, nor to any other people. Baldwin says we, the readers, follow Bigger step by step and yet know as little about him when this journey ended as we did when it began. What is even more remarkable, Baldwin writes, we know almost as little about the social dynamic which we are to believe created him. Those Negroes who surround Bigger, his hard-working mother, his ambitious sister, his pool room cronies might be considered as far richer and far more subtle and accurate illustrations of the ways in which Negroes are controlled in society and the complex techniques that they have evolved for their survival. Baldwin isn't saying the rage shouldn't be in Native Son. He later writes, no Negro living in America hasn't felt rage and hatred. He's saying black rage is more subtle than Bigger's all-consuming rage, and that depiction would be more true. In dealing with racism, blacks temper their response, struggle with it, sometimes suppress it, and occasionally the rage appears as something almost uncontrollable. These actions show the social at work. The personal is social. Bigger's isolation from his own group creates a climate common to most Negro protest novels, which Baldwin feels has led us all to believe that in black life there exists no tradition, no field of manners, no possibility of ritual or intercourse, such as may, for example, sustain the Jew after he has left his father's home. But for Baldwin, the fact is not that the Negro has no tradition, but that there has as yet arrived no sensibility sufficiently profound and tough to make this tradition articulate. Baldwin is throwing down the gauntlet here. I have arrived, baby. James Baldwin to the rescue. Baldwin writes that the Negro in America does not really exist except in the darkness of our minds. This is why his history and his progress, the relationship to all other Americans, has been kept in the social arena. He is a social and not a personal or a human problem. To think of him is to think of statistics, slums, rapes, injustice, remote violence. But the reality of man as a social being is not his only reality. And that artist is strangled, who is forced to deal with human beings solely in social terms. Baldwin's assertion that the characters surrounding Bigger, who temper their outrage, say more about race than Bigger's unrelenting fury, reminds me of the town where I grew up and currently live. Growing up, my town was 98% black. Black as an adjective was a given. People paid attention to what you did. We loved. We had sex. We praised God. We rejected God. We paid bills, went into debt, feared sickness, battled sickness, cared for our families, neglected our families, raged at the police for killing our children, pondered in anguish why some of the children are so bad. The inhabitants of my town were not just victims of racism and violence, but people. In their habitat, they are simply people in all their complexity and variety, as are LGBT people. But they walk outside the world and suddenly they are other. They are black people, lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and trans people. Often the motivations behind the designations not shining from the brightness of anybody's rainbow. Sometimes our own people trap us in these categories, our own writers, academics, politicians. Often when I hear black commentators and academics, there's a major disconnect from what I see and hear at home. They ignore what's going on and being said to fit their paradigms, and the humanness of the inhabitants is gone. The inhabitants become symbols. If we don't depict the inhabitants of our own towns as human beings, when are we going to be portrayed as human? Baldwin wants us to find ways to celebrate a character's humanness, to comment on the crap we endure without allowing it to consume our stories. The crap's there, and occasionally the effects of it come raging out. I can testify to that. One of my tasks today was to take a look at a modern writer to study how he or she fits as an inheritor of James Baldwin's legacy. I chose New York Times columnist Charles Blow. Blow is black and bisexual and often quotes Baldwin in his tweets and op-ed pages in the New York Times. He often reaches for what Baldwin calls the complete truth. He digs for contradictions to his arguments and addresses them. He comes from the same small, predominantly black world that I come from. In his memoir, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, a Baldwin that's titled, to be sure, he makes a journalist's mistake of writing excellent descriptors, beautiful sentences, without the ability to enter a story and be selective about detail and what to highlight. Church, homosexuality, child molestation, race, masculinity, violence, all the traditionals are there. But they don't have the impact he intends. He doesn't allow his characters to be, he interprets them. Blow's book reminds me of a Baldwin quote I found. The journalistic method is not really so flexible as we suppose. It is capable of description, but not of penetration. The LGBT Washington Blade disagrees, and as a result of the book called Blow, the James Baldwin of our time. In the spirit of James Baldwin, I'm sticking to my analysis. In his criticism, Baldwin declares, without no doubt, this is my taste, and this is why. He says, I believe we need to dig deeper. To become a great artist or thinker is a struggle to be, a struggle to think, to not give in to the dominant thought when you disagree. When we read these hard reviews, harsh essays, we see James Baldwin not giving in. He is educating himself, trying to figure things out. So what is underneath James Baldwin's missionary zeal? I believe it is this. I do care as a black man that I and my brothers and sisters are beaten, terrorized, and killed. I do care as a gay man that I and my LGBT brothers and sisters are beaten and terrorized and killed. I am the other in Greenwich Village. I am the other in Harlem. I have thought incessantly about these things. I have analyzed the motivations behind these horrors, so how could I not care? But is it possible to care in a way that won't reduce me to the failures I see in these works? Is there a way to present what I see without my characters becoming symbols? I want to do something else. And as I read these works, I am forming what that something else is. For Baldwin, that something else shown through in Go Tell It on the Mountain. While preparing to read it, I found this in the introduction. James Baldwin is hailed as the first novel about Negroes to be written from a non-racial point of view. It represents a significant milestone in the development of American literature. As Harrison Smith wrote in the Chicago Times, this revelation of Negro life in America owes its impressiveness and its sensoriality in part to Baldwin's ability to create a prose style that is once poetic and true. He knows Harlem, his people, and the language they use. He gives to the reader a sense of reality and vitality that is truly extraordinary. There is no room for pity in his book. His characters are three-dimensional, and they demand our respect and admiration as living and suffering human beings. Well done, James. Go Tell It on the Mountain is number 39 on Modern Library's 100 Greatest Novels. Sorry, James. Richard Rice's Native Son is number 20. My solace to James is this. You made a confused, gay, church-going teen jump in recognition. I was in a book. All of me. I read Native Son, and I thought it was kind of stupid.